Right. Perfect. So again, hello, everyone. So like I mentioned, thank you so much to be here so early in the morning, and I very much appreciate, Vincent and Olivier for putting this, seminar together. And I miss seeing everyone in person, and I'm sure, like I said, there will be, very soon many opportunities to meet in Canada, but maybe in the US and any other part of the world. So I am going to get straight into my presentation, so we have more time for discussion today. And let me try and share my screen here. Okay, so I guess you can see this.
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Okay, so I'm going to start to share the slides. All righty. So, my talk today is centered on two things. So the first is I'd be exploring a little bit about what SOCA, or value creating education, means to me, and I think by now all of you have been quite sort of familiarized with this approach to learning. It is an approach to curriculum that developed in early 20th century Japan. Also, in relation to SOCA, or value creating education, I'll be exploring today through my talk, education for sustainable development and global citizenship. Now, these are initiatives led by UNESCO. UNESCO is the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. So in particular, within the history of UNESCO's engagement with education for sustainable development and global citizenship, I'll engage with target 4.7 of the Sustainable Development Goals, but more about that in a bit. Overall, the premise of my work is that there is a lack of scholarly literature on values-based perspectives that can contribute to the discourse and practice of education for sustainable development and global citizenship. So this presentation has three parts. In the first part, I'll briefly explore and discuss value creating education. In the second part, I aim to introduce and situate my work in the field of education for sustainable development and global citizenship. And finally, in the last section, I'll share some of the proposals from my recent work on value creating global citizenship education. So, to begin, in the first part of this presentation, let me provide a brief introduction to SOCA, or value creating education. SOCA, or value creation, is the capacity to find meaning, to enhance one's own existence and contribute to the well-being of others under any circumstance. So this is a definition by Dr. Ikeda, who is, I think everyone knows of his work by now. He is an educator. And he is, of course, also the president of the lay Buddhist organization, the Soka Gakkai International. So this is a definition of SOCA, or value creating education, SOCA, or value creation as a concept. Now, if we look at SOCA, or value creating education, it therefore can be defined as a learner-centered approach that is focused on the health, well-being, and happiness of each student. Happiness, has a very specific understanding in the sort of field of SOCA studies. Happiness is described as the ability to lead a contributive life for the welfare of self and others. So, for example, within the SOCA schools and universities, which are secular institutions founded by Dr. Ikeda, a key emphasis within learning across all these schools and universities is to enhance students' relationships in education, to broaden an understanding of other people and cultures. So this, of course, includes the SOCA University of America, and I think you heard from Dr. Jay Heffron yesterday from SUA. SUA, as you might know, is a liberal arts college in California. So a key feature of Soka University is to provide students with a study abroad experience, which is included in tuition, so that every undergraduate spends a semester living in and learning about another culture. So another example is the Soka schools in Japan, and these schools aim to promote friendships among the students as a key goal. So what I find, and what many scholars find as well, is that within the Soka schools and in universities, we often find expressed in the universities or the institution's mission statement the aim to develop relationships and a sense of purpose within the students to contribute to the wider world as global citizens. It has been argued that the philosophy that undergirds the notion of relationship building in Ikeda's proposals stems from the Buddhist view of interdependence. And Ikeda explicitly draws a link between the Buddhist view of interdependence and his proposals on education for global citizenship. In a lecture delivered at the Teachers College in Columbia University in 1996, he alludes to this concept of dependent origination. As he explains elsewhere, dependent origination, or pratitya samutpada in Sanskrit, is the view that all beings and phenomena exist or occur in relation to other beings or phenomena. Everything is linked to an intricate web of causation and connection, and nothing, whether in the realm of human affairs or of natural phenomena, can exist or occur solely of its own accord. So I'll give you a minute to just sort of digest that concept of dependent origination. So, so there is this ontological understanding of Soka, or value creation, informed by the Buddhist view of interdependence of all life. This philosophy has enthused several people across, Soka institutions worldwide to take constructive change within their local communities. Here are now, I'll move on very specifically to key lessons for Soka studies in education, which I think are relevant to the ongoing and future efforts in this field of studies. Beyond Soka schools and Soka universities to mainstream education worldwide. What are some of the key lessons for this field of inquiry, including, of course, for this new center and for the aspiring students here? I hope that we can have, some discussions based on some of these thoughts that I have. I'm going to share a little bit first on the importance of comparative and contextual studies. But before that, I'd like to share a little bit from my own personal journey in this field. So I grew up in the city of Kolkata in India. And as an undergrad student at the University of Delhi, I became interested in the educational ideas of the Soka thinkers. As a student, I was disillusioned by the education that I had experienced in India. And this was in spite of the fact that, my school and university were highly reputed institutions. I felt that the education imparted was often divorced from the students' lived experiences of their daily lives. And so I decided to study at Soka University in Japan. And I know we have two colleagues from SUJ today. So I studied at Soka University in Japan, founded by Dr. Ikeda. And in my first year, I studied Japanese proficiency and then acquired my master's or graduate degree in education. So when I entered Soka University, I really wanted to focus solely on Mr. Makiguchi's educational pedagogy. So Mr. Makiguchi is the sort of the progenitor and the founder of the Soka, field in a sense. So I really wanted to just focus on his educational pedagogy and the ideas of Dr. Ikeda. However, my Shido Kyoju, my master's supervisor, was interested in my doing a comparative study, that extended beyond his expertise on Makiguchi and Japan. He was already doing that for a while. He wanted now for me to bring in my sort of experience, from the Indian education. And so consequently, my dissertation, instead of focusing only on Makiguchi, became a comparative study of Makiguchi and the Indian political leader, his contemporary, Mahatma Gandhi. I think Gandhi is, of course, needs no introduction. So then I did my doctoral work, after I finished my studies in Japan. I then went on to UK to do my PhD in a comparative study of Makiguchi and Gandhi and Ikeda, and looking at their relevance for education for the 21st century. And I think that it is quite unusual, to sort of really be interested in such Asian thinkers, even in leading academic institutions such as University of London. But I think what one really, what is very sort of encouraging is that we see more and more research, undergrad, master's, PhD, coming out that are looking at marginalized communities and perspectives and how to bring those into mainstream education. So I'm really sort of interested in that. So my point on the need for contextual studies is that it is helpful to understand, not just when we get into Soka studies in education, not just, okay, so what did Dr. Ikeda say, or what did Mr. Makiguchi say, but what is the context in which they developed their ideas? What were their creative modes of thinking, and their creativity and their courage? And how can we learn from that creativity and courage that is applicable to our time? I think it's that departure in our learning that is possible through a comparative and contextual studies. So, I can really see the importance of comparative studies now, for Soka education. So, I also want to give some examples as I sort of explore this field of comparative studies in Soka education. When we look at the Dewey-Soka dialogue, so I borrow from this dialogue between Dr. Ikeda and the Dewey scholars, Jim Garrison and Larry Hickman. It's published in a book. When we read this book and when we sort of, introspect based on this dialogue that they had, we can understand the term value creation as growth and character, through their discussions. So when I also look at the notion of value creation in the dialogues, let's say between Dr. Radhakrishnan, the Indian Gandhian scholar, and Dr. Ikeda, I see how value creation is interpreted as this non-dualistic philosophy. So it depending on who one is having a conversation with, right? Or where we are looking to apply the concept of value creation, the understanding of value creation starts to develop new meaning. And so this is why I feel the importance of comparative and contextual studies, that it's not just that there is a single definition of what is meant by value creation, but how through the dialogue within our own particularities, where we are situated, we can understand new meanings to the term value creation that is applicable for ourselves, our students, our communities, and so on and so forth. So in my work, I use value creation as a lens. So specifically in a recently published article, I compare, the notion of value creation as non-dualistic philosophy that, talks about the inextricable link between self and others. And when I look at, value creation as a lens, so you can imagine that, I'm holding this lens and I'm trying to look, for what are very similar non-dualistic philosophies that exist. And in my case, the Asian diasporas. And I find that there are many schools in India that have been value creating in the way that they also look at the inextricable link between self and others. So value creation becomes like a lens with which we can explore similar others, schools and philosophies that focus on same types of priorities. So my, moving on, my second suggestion for this field is that, how can we look at the education for sustainable development and global citizenship initiatives, led by UNESCO, using a value creating lens, But before I discuss my thoughts related to the fields of education for sustainable development and global citizenship in the second part of my presentation, let me share something from my own teaching. I often end, in my teaching, I end with this Buddhist parable to explain an important lesson from a study of Soka perspectives. So the story is called The Jewel Hidden in the Robe, and the story goes like this. Once upon a time, there lived a man whose friend was a rich public servant. One day, the man visited his friend, who entertained him with food and wine. The man fell asleep. The rich friend, however, needed to set out on an urgent business trip. The friend had wanted to give the man a priceless jewel which had a mystic power to fulfill any desire. But the man was fast asleep. So the friend sewed the gem into the hem of the sleeping man's robe. The man awoke to find his friend gone, unaware of the jewel his friend had given him. Before long, the man happened to sink into poverty, wandered through many countries, experiencing many hardships. After a long time, now reduced to a state of sheer penury, he met his old rich friend. The friend, surprised at his condition, told him about the gift he had given, and the man learned for the first time that he had possessed the priceless jewel all along. This allegory reminds us of the vast inner potential that exists within ourselves and others. For education, it means paying attention not just to the knowledge content in classroom teaching, but also giving adequate attention to the institution's untaught curriculum or the school ethos that can bring out the pupils' innate abilities and strengths so that learners can create value with their own efforts. So moving on, the Delors report titled Learning the Treasure Within, published by UNESCO in 1996, proposed an integrated vision for education. The 4 pillars of learning described in this report are learning to know, learning to do, learning to be, and learning to live together. This report continues to inspire thinking on education worldwide and has been critically revisited several times for fresh insights into ways of challenging education for cognitive, behavioral, and the socio-emotional dimensions of learning. So I would like to focus here on 2 aspects, of the treasure within, as represented in the Delors report. The first aspect is that the treasure lies within human beings, the abilities and aptitudes that can enhance social and self-actualization. The second is the value of learning itself as the treasure, which has been championed as the right of each child by activists such as the Nobel laureate Malala Yousafzai. Considering the second aspect, of viewing education as a treasure, the broader emphasis is on developing societies that value and support the needs of education. So what are some of the challenges, that we face, some of the global challenges, and how can we develop a more global education while also addressing issues of sustainability? So some urgent concerns for education in the 21st century, of course, we all know this, these challenges that we all face are climate change, migration due to strife for climate conditions, and the politics of narrow nationalisms. And of course, many communities are facing that, at the forefront of facing these calamities. As a response to some of these issues, in September 2015, the United Nations adopted the 17 Sustainable Development Goals with active participation by UNESCO. Of these goals, Goal 4 aims at providing equitable and lifelong learning, and quality education. So within Goal 4, Target 4.7 addresses education for sustainable development and global citizenship education to foster global citizens who would meet the world's current challenges. So in this final part of my presentation today, I bring together the discussions related to both fields, to the field of SOCA or value creating education and education for sustainable development or global citizenship. So I bring together my discussions related to both fields and share some reflections from my work on value creating global citizenship education. So what is the basic, premise of my work? It is that a shift in paradigm and perspectives can enhance praxis, So depending on what perspective we have, the practice of education will start to change, of course. One of the proposals that I make is to shift the emphasis, the current emphasis in education worldwide, from a neoliberal paradigm, very sort of capitalistic, sort of profit-oriented education, to a value-creating paradigm. I think it's so important to reflect on what is our definition of global citizenship education, So as scholarly work suggests, depending on what definition, we choose, and I know global citizenship is is part of the agenda of this center as well. And so, I'd urge to maybe come to a discussion as to, and it would be interesting to sort of investigate, to look at what are people's understanding of the term global citizenship? Because as recent scholarly work suggests, depending on what definition of global citizenship we adopt, the definitions and models in terms of student outcomes of global citizenship education will start to change. So this is how I use a value creating approach to examine education for global citizenship. So the definition I use is a value creating approach to global citizenship. The focus of my work is to examine, so what are the underlying paradigm and perspectives, within education for global citizenship and sustainable development. So for example, I situate my studies within this wide-ranging scholarship that challenges the Western-dominated agendas and the underlying Western worldview in global citizenship education. And I propose value creating global citizenship education as a pedagogical approach that I have developed from a study of less widely known perspectives. So, several scholars have launched a critique of this, neoliberal sort of very capitalist paradigm and influence on education, of course. And in this context, I argue that a value-creating approach, specifically for the 3 domains of learning as outlined for the practice of education by UNESCO, could enhance education for global citizenship in the following way. So, when we look at knowledge, there is a lot of emphasis on critical skills, and I think that's great. But also within the knowledge, that we acquire, can we also put an emphasis on dialogic modes of thinking, so that's something a value creating approach would provide. Then within the socio-emotional domain of learning, there is again a lot of emphasis by UNESCO and within education to have empathy for the other person. But can we move beyond empathy to developing friendship and compassion as a key goal of education? And again, using a value-creating approach, can we move beyond charity and advocacy, sort of reaching out to people who are less better off than us, to really becoming contributive citizens, whose innate life disposition is that of contributing to self and others, not just through education, but wherever we are, in our local communities, in our daily life. So these are some of the shifts I think that can take place if we use a value-creating approach. So value-creating global citizenship education as a pedagogical approach is one that advances learning for sustainable development based on an integrated view of life. It engages with the values, interests, and beliefs of learners and is founded on a trust in the learner's capacity to create value and meaning for self and others. So there are 6 themes for the practice of value-creating global citizenship education. The first is a sense of interdependence, common humanity, and a global outlook. How can we promote more sort of sense of interdependence as a common humanity and enable students to have a global outlook? The second is to generate an awareness of climate change as planetary citizens, not just for students, but for us, as teachers, scholars, practitioners. And how can we all, develop a bigger commitment to reflective, dialogic, and transformative learning, as well as a commitment to sustainable development through intercultural perspectives, learning from different views, such as Soka, but also, from Sub-Saharan Africa, Ubuntu, or from Latin America, Bun Vivir, how can we integrate such diverse forms of knowledge into our learning, teaching, and daily life? And can we really develop a belief in the value-creating capacity for self and social actualization that exists within each one of us? And finally, through educating for global citizenship, can we develop an understanding of peace and nonviolence as being central to the human rights agendas? So I won't go into the details of these themes because of the limitations of time today, but what they do, as I mentioned earlier, what these themes do is to really challenge some of the knowledge-based assumptions, epistemic assumptions, within the current practice of education for sustainable development and global citizenship, and offer suggestions for practice. So, for example, as mentioned, several scholars have argued that there is this neoliberal approach, and one of the critiques of education, which is informed by a neoliberal paradigm, is that while maintaining its focus on and giving agency to the individual human beings, education for global citizenship can sometimes get trapped in promoting individualism. And so in this context, I argue that a value-creating paradigm can have a substantive role in nurturing individuals who can lead contributive lives for the welfare of self and others. So to summarize my presentation so far, value-creating global citizenship education brings in certain non-Western perspectives into the discourse on education for sustainable development and global citizenship. This approach takes SOCA or value creation as the focal point of inquiry, but I also locate commonalities with other perspectives, like I mentioned, Ubuntu, Bun Vivir, as well as scholars such as John Dewey. And from the African continent, I pick up, sort of get influenced by thinkers such as Wangari Maathai. And one of the lessons, when we look at Wangari Maathai and the Green Belt movement in Africa, one of the, sort of lessons from these movements is that how can we place an emphasis on the human personal dimension of education? I won't go again into the details of this because, we're coming to a close, but, I have in my 2020 book, I developed these concepts, through my work that really sort of digs deep into the practice of value creating education. And, I think just sort of to recap, we can integrate value creating education in a very specific way within learning to know, integrate conversations on earth-centered perspectives, learning to be. We can look at alternative perspectives such as Ubuntu, Bunvivir, Soka, as different ways of viewing self, others, nature, universe. This is also very much plausible and possible in our efforts. Learning to do, we could sort of really look at what a values-based approach means, in addition to developing a critical approach in taking action for climate justice and social justice. And learning to live together, with an agenda of leaving no one behind. So thank you so much for your patience to listen to my talk over Zoom. I know it's not easy. Here is my QR code to my blog and my email address. Please feel free to write to me. I'd very much love to support your ongoing work as you move forward, from your studies into further studies, or if you decide to, get into the world as practitioners at any stage of your life. If I can support you, I'd be very, very, very humble. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you very much, Namrata. I'm very happy I pushed the recording button for this one.
Yeah.
Thank you. There was so much. I know it was very content heavy. So thank you so much for your patience.
No, thank you, Namrata. It was very clear, very articulated, very motivating, inspiring. Bravo.
Thank you, Vincent. It means a lot.
Definitely. And thank you very much for the articulation. It's a very good pedagogy. For me, it was clear from the beginning to the end. Merci again.
Thank you. I appreciate so much.
That was a very nice hybrid for a while. Very good.
So there is probably many questions on that. I mean, that's beautiful, just beautiful. Thank you again, Namrata.
All right.
Anthony.
So we'll wait for those who are ready, and they're going to come and sit here and talk to you directly.
Perfect. Thank you. I already see some hands up, so I'm very excited. Thank you.
So the first one will be Anthony.
Hi, first, thank you very much for your presentation. Very insightful, very interesting. Part of which I found it so interesting is that recently I just had a model UN. I don't know if you
yes, of course I know. Yes.
in New York, and the SDGs, especially number 4, the one that you're more specifically you have a lot of knowledge on, is the one that we try to push for the most, because we believe that by tackling this one, we can pretty much solve all the other ones as well when you have good quality education. And which is why I had this question. I know you couldn't really dive into it because how packed your presentation was, but I wanted to ask you, throughout your research, what was, in your opinion, the biggest obstacle into integrating the value creation based approach in our education school systems?
Wow, that is a $1 million question. That's amazing. Thank you, Anthony. I think you should, this is a question for, it's a PhD question. It's brilliant. And I think it should be posed to all of us, who are working in this field. There were actually several. I think the biggest one was as a young woman, when I was all starry-eyed and I was like, my goodness, there is this amazing pedagogy that I've just encountered in Japan, and I'm going to go to the University of London and tell everyone about this and how important it is to apply in mainstream education. So, of course, my PhD supervisors, I had 2 in London, and they were both very much on board and very supportive of my my work, my proposed work on Makiguchi's ideas and Dr. Ikeda's ideas. But they also warned me that just because I'm so enthusiastic about it doesn't mean that it's going to be applicable for various people. So that was like a wake-up call to move beyond, just being starry-eyed, to look at, well, I am enthused by something, but it's not necessary that it's applicable and relevant for other people. And I think one of the challenges that, which, like I said, it was very interesting that my master's supervisor forced me into this direction of comparative study, whereas I just wanted to focus on Stoker studies purely, as that being my mode of inquiry. But because I got into comparative studies, I was able to, and I am able to understand that at every juncture, when I have a dialogue and discussion about value creating education, I need to know what are the particularities of the students who I am addressing. So if I'm teaching for State University of New York, right, it's not going to be the same definition of Soka education or Soka studies that I use. It's going to be a very different one, right? Depending on what is their need, what is their context. The way I can explain to you or anybody is in the way that I use Dr. Ikeda's dialogues, in looking at how he uses this notion of value creation. When you read the Dewey Soka dialogue, you almost feel that that's what it means. It means growth and development, right? Value creation is growth and development within the human being. That's how you're creating value, you're growing, you're developing for the nurturing self, nurturing others. So that's value creation within the Dewey Soka dialogue. Then you close that book, you open up a Dr. Radhakrishnan, Dr. Ikeda dialogue, and then you start to look at value creation as a non-dualistic philosophy that looks at this non-dualistic paradigm of the inextricable link between the self and the other, and then what that means for education in terms of promoting, let's say, friendship. The whole notion of friendship is informed by this concept in Japanese, which means not just empathy, but it also means compassion. So then you start to dig deep and you understand, oh my goodness, the ontological understanding of value creation, now when it is compared to non-dualistic philosophy with Dr. Radhakrishnan, has an understanding that in practical terms means something. And that when you look at Soka schools, it's like, oh my God, that's why this is what it looks like at the grassroots level in teaching. I know it's a lot of stuff that I'm talking about, but that's why I'm urging that comparative studies, where we are, like in Quebec right now, what are the particularities of the people we are engaging with, the scholars, the students, the practitioners, the community developers, and then trying to understand how in these dialogic forms can we push forward Soka education. That's a key challenge that never ends because it's dialogue. It's never going to end. It's not like I had that challenge and I've overcome it. So that's an ongoing challenge. I think that's such a beautiful question. The other one specifically to SDG 4.7 is, I'm going to shift gears here. SDG 4.7 or Education for Sustainable Development and Global Citizenship, which is a mandate by the United Nations and UNESCO, is still very Western oriented, in its understanding. And scholars that are pushing the boundaries and saying, no, the concepts of Ubuntu, concepts of Bunvivir, concepts of Soka mean something to us as people, as schools, as communities. So how are we going to push forward those boundaries? And I think as a young scholar and as a youth, to really build those discussions into the conversations, because honestly, youth are providing the pathways for us scholars to move forward, whether it is climate justice, or other sort of social issues, Me Too movement, racism. It's youth that are pushing forward the boundaries and saying, no, marginalized people, marginalized perspectives, whether it is from the African diaspora, Asian diaspora, we need to put that forward while we take action. It's not just about taking action, it's what's behind that action. So it's a very long answer. I'm so sorry. Thank you so much, Anthony. You really got me thinking.
Thank you very much for your answer. I just want to try to see if I understood well, because to me, what seems to be the biggest obstacle is the fact that when you did your comparative research, which I really like it, I feel like I understand more what the obstacle is thanks to that, is because since we do not have the same background, like we don't, as you mentioned, the understanding that we have is still Western based. So we're trying to integrate it with the Western perspective. And since we are not quite doing the work to see it from like the Eastern perspective, this is like the biggest obstacle for the integration. Is that what I understand?
That's so true. That's so true. Starting from the curriculum to the stories we hear, as kids, to what we learn at the university level and teacher education level. We know so much about John Dewey, but we don't know about Makiguchi as a teacher educator. Why? We don't know about Krishnamurti. And these are people that have made an impact on the praxis. They've made an impact on practical levels. So why are teacher educators across the world not learning about them? Why in Japan or in India have I learned about Dewey and not Makiguchi and Krishnamurti? So you're absolutely spot on. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Namrata. You mentioned at the beginning this was Anthony's PhD topic.
Yes.
Looks like you.
Yes.
And then with your answer, we already have one chapter in the can. So well done. And next we have Ebed.
Very good morning. Thank you for your powerful and thought-provocative presentation this morning. So my question will actually be based on value creating, because this is my main focus now as a undergraduate student at Laval University. You've mentioned the Dell's report. You starting with learning to know, and then you ending with learning to live. So my biggest concern now for Haiti is how education is actually taught to children. And I'm actually trying to do my best to kind of like bring in the Soga education to Haiti. And then, because I believe as Dr. Ikeda puts it, that's the best way. That's actually the initial way to start a revolution in Haiti. And from your perspective and as an expert in the field, how could I actually start if I actually borrow the words from Dr. Urban? How could I start sowing the seed of Soka education in Haiti? It could actually be as well, the Dewey education, the style of Dewey education, or as you mentioned, the Buntun education. But how could I start with sowing that education in Haiti? To start boosting the way that we do things in Haiti, and then to radically change not only the social aspect of Haiti, but the environmental aspect and economical aspect of everything that we're actually seeing now in Haiti.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. Could I please ask you to spell your name for me, please?
My first name is Ebed, E like Eden, B like boy, E like Eden, D like David. And my last name is Louis in French, Louis.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Sorry about that. I like to know the name well, and I know my name gets pronounced in different ways. So thank you so much. That's amazing. Haiti. Oh my God, I'd love to visit. Even if it is by Zoom, but love to visit in person. I think, of course, you may have read Dr. Ikeda's, book, which has been newly it's a revised publication of his work, Soka Education. I would encourage you to really sort of keep that as a key text. The new publication looks at, some sort of languages and key text, because they had been sort of not understood as well in the previous editions. But so anyway, I'd sort of say that would be a key text to continue to look at. I think at a practical level, and that's what I've really that has been my endeavor in the past, let's say, decade or so, is what can we do as teacher educators and practitioners, moving from the scholarly discourse in Ikeda Soka studies in education. So one of the things is, I think, really looking at what is so you said about two things. You mentioned both the Delors report. So you have an aspect of global education that you'd like to sort of take into your teaching, but you also want to take value creating education into your teaching. So there are these two aspects, right?
That's correct.
I think for teacher, right? So for teacher educators, there are a lot of sort of pioneering work, you may already know this, being done by civil society organization and professional bodies in the field of global learning and global education. So I can name a few, and I can please feel free to sort of exchange emails, and I can give you more information on that. But the names that strike me is Asia Society in the US, Oxfam in UK, and then you have the APCEIU, which is the Asia Pacific, sort of center in Korea. These particular centers have gathered a lot of resources, which are very good, very sort of practical, pragmatic, and applicable, for scholars working in the field of global learning. And they have also started to look at, sort of marginalized perspectives, such as Ubuntu, Bunvivir, Soka, and how to integrate that within learning. So I think that would be a go-to in terms of resource. and that's pretty good. In terms of value creating education, of course, I've started to, myself and other scholars have started to very slowly take baby steps in how to make it accessible to practitioners. So, for example, learning to know, can we integrate more earth-centered perspectives, within our teaching and learning? So looking at the Kenyan example of Wangari Maathai and what that would mean and so on and so forth. Then learning to be, some of the things that I shared in my last slide, but I shared it really hurriedly. And then, of course, there's a conceptual toolbox that I, sort of develop. But looking at that, I think would be also a resource. I'd be very happy to forward, some of those to you.
All right, I'll email you on that.
But I think, very much that the concept of dialogue and what are the particularities of your students, and at a basic level to have the dialogue ongoing, because I think Soka studies starts with the ethos or the untaught curriculum. It's only that way that it can really have relevance, because you can have a beautiful book out there, but the Soka studies comes to life through the teacher-student relationship, the student-student relationship, the student-nature relationship, and the student classroom material relationship. That creative coexistence that Ikeda talks about is only through you who's going to make it possible. So if you are there, it's going to happen. Soka studies and global education will happen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, stay a second. I want to thank you very much, Namrata. I wanted to check something with you, going a little bit deeper. As you know, recently Haiti has become a disaster zone. If we go to the airport, we're going to get killed immediately. I mean, it's really, really dangerous. And we discussed with Abet in detail about an idea that we want to put to the test with you, that when we think in terms of education, we think in terms of school buildings and teachers and students and benches. However, if we take something like the botanical garden in Brazil, there are many, many other ways to help people to grow, as Dewey would say, or to think in non-dual way, as Radhakrishnan would say. So we were discussing with Abed that maybe a worthwhile research project would be to document how the Soka seeds has bloomed in many, many different ways, not just as school buildings, because Abed's dream is to go back to Haiti and start a real school network with buildings and kids and teachers. Like, it's a big, big dream. I wanted to make sure you understand that. But in the meantime, maybe he could start with a botanical garden. People are starving now. So, how to plant your own garden, make a network like that. Through your research, do you have any experience of how a great idea, it doesn't have to be Soka, how the great idea has blossomed in unexpected way or original ways, kind of like help us to help Abed to, sorry, it's your country, help Abed to brainstorm. Is that a good research project, or has the research already been done? What kind of shape should the first seed of Soka have in Haiti, if it's going to happen?
I love that. My goodness. And that's Soka. That is the Soka education, right? I mean, look at Olivier. He thinks that this is his project.
Well, we discussed about it.
You can have it. You can have it.
We discussed the boundaries. That's what the student relationship looks like within the Soka paradigm. So there you have it. I think that's a fantastic proposal. Definitely to be in touch with with the group out in Brazil. They're doing some fantastic work out in the Amazon. And I think in that regard, there is a lot of work that is going on in this field of education for sustainable development, I think specifically looking at Wangari Maathai and the aspect of, and the whole phenomenon of what happened at that time in history in Kenya. It's the way that she galvanized people based on their own values, needs, and interests, right? So the Kikuyu people, which is the largest ethnic group in Africa, Kenya at that time, were really sort of motivated by the sycamore fig tree. They regarded the fig tree to be really sacred. So Wangari Maathai knew that this is sacred, but only when she started doing her PhD, she understood that in terms of the soil conservation, and so on and so forth, the presence of this tree on the land had a very important meaning. And it was at that time, that this political regime, the dictatorial political regime in Kenya, were trying to have this sort of great economic development that was lining up their pockets. And Maathai said, no, that's not happening. We cannot be cutting down trees and having this economic development that's working for you, the political regime. We are going to plant seeds and build trees that will take care of the combat the forest devastation, that will give money to the women who were particularly very had these economic and social anxieties, because they were, sort of losing their money and they were losing their everything. So she then started to have these marches with the women holding saplings in their hands, and these marches not only led to the development of, great agricultural growth, the Greenbelt movement, but it also led to economic growth. It also led to the dictatorial political regime coming down. So it was a political, development as well. So now UNESCO, so when I'm talking about specifically in terms of research, when we look at the UNESCO agenda for sustainable development, there are 3 dimensions UNESCO is exploring: the economic, social, and environmental. But when you look at the Kenyan Greenbelt movement, you have 4 dimensions. You have the economic, you have the social, you have the environmental, but it started with the human personal dimension. There is a case to be made about this, in terms of how development can take place and how development needs to be grassroots. We talk about it, but in a very superficial way. But how can you talk about it in a more substantive way? So there is much more scholarly work that can be done, drawing from practical examples. And I think in terms of the practice, like Olivier said, I bet you've got such a big challenge in front of you, but I think the SOCA network is a great resource amongst, from practitioner to civil society to schools, institutions of higher education. There's Olivier, there's Vincent, Maria in the room. There are very many people at very many levels that can offer you the kind of creativity that you'd need, that we don't know right now. We don't really practically know what you might need at that time, but to stay plugged in to this, and I think to start with the human personal dimension of education, I think those would be 2 great ways. Stay plugged in to the SOCA network and think about the Maathai example.
Thank you very much. I'm taking note on that, and I'll write you on that about it as well.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
All right.
And next we have Alex.
Yes.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here with us this morning. As a future teacher, I read your book, thanks to Vincent, from whom I borrowed it. I was very inspired. And I would like to dedicate a part of my pre-university class to the value creating education for sustainable development. I'm going to be a teacher in geography and political science at pre-university level. So I'm going to have some kind of freedom to create my classes. In your book, you were talking about courses for future teachers, but it was more orientated towards non-violence with Gandhi and movements with, I think, with Martin Luther King Jr. and Nelson Mandela as well, and Centre Ikeda, obviously. So I would like to keep in touch, so maybe we can talk about more environmental way of bringing courses that would fit in my future classes. So that's not really a question, but it's more something like a, and I'm handling. I'm asking you. So here we go.
Thank you so much, Alex. I am humbled by it. I really very much look forward to it. I think gosh, amazing. You're right in the lineage of Mr. Makiguchi with geography and political science. And what an amazing combination.
Yeah.
And-
So
and-
Geography of Life is the book I have to read next. I know it's a big thing. It's pretty old, but I have to get into it pretty soon.
Yes, absolutely. I think there are really nuggets of wisdom from the geography of human life and also from Dr. Ikeda's, speeches that sort of invoke that, including his UN speeches. But I definitely look forward to being in touch, and I think the environmental way is there's so much to be done in that regard.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Alex.
My other not question is a passage from your book that I was really inspired by. I have the exact quote here, but I would like you to tell the group instead of me. It's another Buddhist parable with other jewels. Do you know what I'm talking about?
With other jewels?
It's the net thing.
Oh, yes.
So
Yes.
if you would like to share it with the group, I really was touched by that.
Thank you so much. I can't remember that, the parable verbatim.
It's Indra's net.
Yes. No, I mean, I can't remember that. What I was going to say is that I can't remember how Dr. Ikeda reads that. But he does, talk about the Indra's net. So that dependent origination, the slide that I had, picked up, that is from another speech. But this Indra's net is the parable that he talks about in his 1996 lecture delivered at the Teachers College in Columbia University. And in that, he talks about the Indra's net, which has these beautiful jewels, right, on the net. And what happens is that each jewel is sparkling, not just because of its own light that's coming, from inside, but because of the light of other jewels. It's shining even more brightly. So you can imagine the magnitude, with which all these jewels are shining, because they're not just, using their own light to shine, but because of each other's light, they are sort of shining that much more beautifully. And so that's, to me, was the concept of dependent origination. He doesn't mention that in his lecture, but that's amazing, Alex, that you picked up on that. Because in another lecture, when I read dependent origination, I said, oh, this Indra's net, he was actually talking about dependent origination. So then I sort of bring that into my conversation. But thank you so much for picking up on that. I'm really touched.
Thank you. It's way better than me reading the actual passage, I think. And just to close with that, I think it's a good representation of the interconnectiveness of everything, not only humans, but every aspect of life. Animals, trees, plants, mushrooms, everything. We're just like bringing, yeah, absolutely. We're just, yeah. So exactly as you said, make everything else, everyone else shine even brighter. So thank you for that. It was really inspiring.
Thank you so much. You inspired me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Did Alex just invent the concept of glowing mushrooms, or was that before already?
I think I've seen it in Hollywood.
Okay. Maybe question comment by somebody who is not of the male gender. That would be nice.
Yes.
Yes, we have Eloise.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yes. Great.
Hi.
Hi.
First of all, I think the way you approached, you tried to like bundle up together so many different ways of seeing the world and seeing ideas and everything to try and come up with how some things that can be considered universal can be declined in so many flavors. I think that is amazing. And on that particular subject, I was wondering from what you've seen, I personally, because it's an issue that touched me personally and the people around me, I see the struggles of neurodivergent students in the classical education systems, and not just our classical education system, all of them. And how do you think that, value creating, Saka, and all the other flavors of those concepts in education could improve the situation for those students that have, in most cases, a lot of potential, but struggle to make the most out of it in the current system?
Wow, that's amazing. All you guys, I mean, this is a PhD coming up. You guys have got like 11 PhD or 9 PhD theses in the room. It's amazing. Yes, it's such a challenging question. It's such a challenging task, right? Because it's about...
if it was easy, we'd already done it.
Exactly. It's so true. If it was easy, we would have already done it. But I think, Eloise, I think it's about, at the bottom level, it is about cultivating friendships, right? To me, it's about friendships between peers, friendships between student teachers, and in life, you know, and that is hard. Friendship is hard to maintain. And I think, if I'm understanding you correctly, I think the whole aspect of what it means to fight for social justice, and in that sense, even environmental justice or climate justice. How do we take our angst and our anxiety in a way that is respectful of others, even though, you know, we're very sort of passionate or anxious about what's happening, right, to us or at a global level? I think it's about how to have those dialogues in spite of that. And that's the most sort of challenging thing to do, you know. And I would say that it's about, while we cultivate those friendships and dialogues, it's also about scholarly pursuits, you know. So how do we engage in studies that are bringing marginalized perspectives to the forefront? You know, because unless we are equipped with that knowledge, especially as young scholars, you know, then, for example, I'm going to divert a little bit to, let's say, the Fridays for Future, you know, the climate strike sort of movement, right? And that's amazing. And that's got its whole potential. How do we combine that with an understanding of social justice based on knowledge? So how do we take the passion from Greta Thunberg and the youth of today, but combine it with a scholarly understanding of what is at the deepest level of social injustice and environmental injustice, and then bring that to the forefront in terms of policies, and make a difference in political as well as policy levels? I think that would be really the challenging task that youth can, like yourself, Eloise, you know, who is in this amazing position, right, today, that you have an understanding of marginal perspectives, but you also are in this situation where you can draw on all the privilege we have, right, where we are situated. We can draw on these privileges to make a scholarly argument and a difference in political and policy terms. And I think if the youth can do that, they'd really, my hat's off to them. And I am here to support in any way possible, because that's what we need.
Thank you, Namrata. I think I might be totally off track here, but I think I heard Eloise talk about divergent opinions, but I know what she meant. She meant neurodivergent, which means people with autism, people with ADHD. I think if I heard divergent, you heard divergent. So actually, the whole question was about neurodivergent.
Yeah, it was more about, like, how do you think that Silka value creating education compared to classical education gives us space and fosters opportunities for those students that will never make it, will never bring out their full potential in the normal system because it's just full of obstacles for them?
Thank you so much. So sorry, I completely misunderstood that question. Thank you, Olivia, as well too.
Well, the answer
clarify
was
that.
very fun, but to another question. So, I mean,
No, I think that is so amazing. You know, that you asked this question. I mean, in terms of educational research, you know, so target 4.7 of SDG 4.7, right? We talk about inclusive education, right? But it is still an agenda that is very much the work of people who are in that field, you know, of looking at kids with learning disabilities and so on and so forth, right? But I think there are different types of disabilities that you know, young people and people in general have. So I can't sort of classify them as this is it and this is what needs to be done. So it depends on what type of learning disabilities we're talking about, you know. But I think in that sense, the whole notion, what I sort of mentioned earlier, and I think all of us who are in this field of SOCA studies know about, is that the whole notion of SOCA is to start with the ethos. The reason the ethos is so important is that because whereas at some levels we don't have any strategies, you know, to how to integrate sort of, you know, knowledge, skills, values that would be applicable or useful for a particular group of people. Because we don't have that expertise at the broader level today, what we do know and what we do have is the basic starting point, and that is to really be able to engage with the learner at that level, that your journey is my journey, you know. So it is at that ethos to really understand that of the SOCA, you know, sort of underpinnings, and then how to take that forward. But I think it's also the creativity. I do feel this may sound that it's not relevant, but I do really feel that it is relevant. When we have a contextual study of Makiguchi, and for that matter, Ikeda or any other such radical creative thinker, when we understand and really read through their strategies, behaviors, and modes of thinking, I am still discovering Gandhi's creativity and his radicality in how he used, you know, strategies in the field of, you know, let's say political science, which is more applicable to Alex's work. But I'm able to understand his modes of thinking better the more deeper I go into Gandhian education. And I think it's that creativity to develop through a deeper understanding of Ikeda's scholarly work, you know. And as we develop the modes of thinking, the creative modes of thinking, then where we are situated, like for yourself, you know, Eloise, perhaps working with the scholar, with kids, you know, who have these particular sort of situations, then developing creativity and creative modes of thinking. I know that it doesn't sound related, but I know that it is related.
so basically the point is, since in SOCA value creating education, you have like the right attitude coming into the room with the learner, even if the toolkit of techniques is not full, since you have the right attitude, you're one step ahead. That's it.
Beautiful. You have the right attitude, and that's the first point. But the second is the scholarly pursuit. The scholarly pursuit and developing creativity through reading contextually the works of such people. There is a plethora of wisdom out there, and the creative, radical, creative, and active citizens. We can become radical, creative, and active citizens through a deep study of these thinkers. And those modes of thinking can be applicable not just because Gandhi was in politics, it's only for political science thinkers, not just because Ikeda is a Buddhist, only for Buddhist thinkers or philosophers. But those modes of thinking are applicable across any field of study. So how do we engage with these thinkers in a deeper level, at a contextual level, is also second thing that we can do to equip ourselves as young scholars, is what I passionately believe in.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, it's less than 10 minutes left. So will there be one lucky person to ask the last question or a comment or anything?
Well, if no one wants to ask the question,
Okay.
last comment, but
Nobody wants to take Anthony's second gold medal? All right, it's Anthony then. No, no, of course. Go to wrap up, comment by Anthony.
Hey, hi again.
Just
Yeah, I just really wanted to say, based on everything that we've heard from your presentation and the answers that you've given us, I want to say a big thank you, because, you know, in one of the answers that you gave me, the passion that you had when you discovered and when you wanted to share it with everyone in the UK, like the passion that you had right there, we can still feel it right now as you're speaking. And it might be even stronger than when you actually started discovering the soca movement. So from all of that, everything that you said with this passion, for us, it's truly inspiring to see that you still carry on with this same engagement, and you truly shared this passion and given it throughout every single word that you said. And I think I'm speaking on behalf of everyone when I said it's truly, truly inspirational. And I want to thank you, not for just sharing like all this knowledge, but sharing with this passion with us. I think it's going to be a very great source of motivation for us to move forward from this point on. So thank you.
My gosh, Anthony, you really made me have tears in my eyes. Oh my God. I tell you, I was feeling that I'm, so humbled and so honored to be part of this conversation. Now I feel like you've given me, you all, and you've articulated it so beautifully. You've given me the strength to keep flying into the future. I am so grateful to you and to everyone here. Thank you so, so, so much.
Yeah, thank you.
So, Namrata, I think the only thing that we can do for the future is to keep the connection with you.
Yes.
Ikeda Centre in Laval, and we all the students, because you will be definitely a very resourceful person for us, So if you agree with that, we can just keep in touch, and each time that there is, because I know that you are really advanced in the thinking about what you are doing about that, was the substance of what you say today. We need that, as a resource for the Ikeda Center here. So let's open the door with you, and not constantly, but really often, I would say, really connect with you. Merci beaucoup, Namrata. You were supposed to be with us today, we have a trouble with the PCR test and the sanitary.
Oh, yes, yes.
Otherwise, you will be with us. That we miss so much, but with the screen, it was okay. So for the future, Namrata, definitely connect with you.
Definitely. I mean, I'm so close back, and hopefully this stupid COVID will not be a barrier next time. And, we are in the same time zone. We are in the same part of the world. I can obviously anytime take a flight and come. And I think I should pay for my own ticket. It's just inspiring to come.
We will take care of that. We will take care of that.
It's so inspiring to come, seriously. This has been a fantastic, fantastic opportunity. Thank you so much. I'll really be voting and rooting for your success, all of you, in the room. Any way that I can support, please reach out.
Monsieur again, thank you very, very, very much.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much.
Okay, we know you have many things to do, a whole world to save, so we will let you go. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Olivia. Thank you, Vincent. You've been stellar taking care of things.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a nice seminar. Bye. 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 Bye.
C'est ce qu'on appelle une belle, a nice live condition. When somebody shine like that, that's through the screen. And